The air at Francis Field was choking. The heat and dust were unbearable, not only for the spectators, but for the runners as well. The 1904 Olympic Marathon was like running through hell. Expectant murmurs scuttled through the crowd, spreading like wildfire. It wasn't long now. From the haze he appeared, a solitary figure, painting a heroic silhouette against the early evening sun. Staggering, but pushing his reserves of energy to the absolute limit, one foot in front of the other, he told himself to just keep moving. The crowd was roaring as the runner kept pace, getting closer to the end. His breathing was measured. Too measured. The officials checked their stopwatches, ready to record his time. A time that was almost mind-boggling. Almost. As the runner crossed the finish line, the crowd erupted. The time was announced through the speaker system. This was what he had been working toward for years. All of his effort had brought him here. As the runner stood there, hands raised in triumph, he looked around the stadium, drinking in the adulation. And his eyes kept darting. Guilty? Guilty about what? He had just run the race of his life. Or had he? This race was going to be unlike anything that had been run before. The crowd believed it knew the winner, but all was not as it seemed. Not only were the runners a little unorthodox, but so were the conditions. The runners were bunched up. Last-minute stretches and snippets of conversation happened before they got the signal to run. One was looking around for a clock, nudging another runner, counting down now. The timetable said a 3 p.m. start, but why so late in the day? They all knew with events like this there was always some delay, and the day was dragging on by this point. Another runner looked over his shoulder, trying to find someone that he knew. He jostled past a few others to get closer, asking if he'd heard anything about the water stops for this event. Usually there were a few to keep things sensible. From what he'd heard, there were only 2, maybe even 1. Surely not. That would be absurd. 2 water stops for a race this long? What were the organisers thinking? Or was this just nerves, or his buddy getting inside his head? Near the front, a voice called out, mostly in jest, asking if they closed the roads for these kinds of events. To his mild alarm, he saw traffic moving along one of the roads. His smile faded. A runner close by piped up, joking that at least the course was only 40 kilometres long. That had to count for something. With a shout, the official raised his pistol. The runners took their standing positions. Everyone was looking around, slightly nervous. There was a loud crack as the pistol went off, and the athletes started moving. The crowd cheered as they left the stadium. The runners were spread out. Measured breaths came with each step. Distance grew between the 2 packs as the race dragged on. More and more dust was whipped into the air, creating a deep, hazy blanket. A second atmosphere, it felt like. Oppressive heat and the risk of being hit by a car added an extra layer of anxiety. A few runners made a brief push to make the gap even bigger, pushing through the wall that the air had become, trying to break free from the group any way that they could. Never had they faced such an enemy in race conditions as these. The front runners broke free, making for a faster pace, breathing through the grit. Pushing through the pain, the front runners started asking themselves, where on earth was the water? They had run about 6 miles by now. They hadn't seen a single water station. Maybe those rumours were true. Around the bend, a water tower appeared. Although it didn't look like an official water stop. The runners took the chance. Things were getting desperate. By now, some runners were starting to question whether they should even continue. Pulling out now would be embarrassing, but at the very least, maybe they'd survive to compete in the next Olympics. Several runners collapsed along the route, unable to continue. The conditions were getting far too extreme, and the lack of water was pushing the runners to the brink. In a section of the route, somewhere in the mid-pack, and a gap opening, one of the runners found himself cramping up. The lack of water had ruined him, and he was dehydrated. Cars were still driving past at speed, kicking dust and rocks around. The dust never had a chance to settle. He couldn't carry on much longer. Contemplating his own participation and whether this was worth it, he started to slow. Barely at a jog now, the runner noticed the air was quiet. Not quite sure what was going on, he turned around. A car had pulled over, and through the window came a hand gesture. "Get in," it seemed to say. Taking a glance down the road, no one was around. Who was going to know? Seriously, there were no spectators, no officials. The runner jumped in the car, quickly ducking low to avoid being seen through the window. Laying down, keeping out of sight, the runner took a relieved breath. Over the short journey, he would gain his composure and strength, just enough to be able to sell it when he crosses that line. He was dropped somewhere further down the road. No one to this day is really sure how far or by whom. Frederick Laws found himself in pole position. Behind Laws was another competitor, struggling even more than him, Thomas Hicks. He had pushed himself to the absolute limit and was struggling just to keep his legs moving. He could see Laws in the distance, just a speck now. Amazing fortitude. Hicks started to debate with himself when some of his trainers showed up. They were not going to let their man fail. Words of encouragement followed, and an offer of support. Hicks declined at first. A moment later, he relented. Near the end, Hicks collapsed in their arms. They offered him a pick-me-up. A medical performance enhancer for a man on the brink. Brandy, egg whites, and strychnine. Just a small amount was a fantastic stimulant. Hicks managed to find some power deep inside and pushed forward. The last segments of the course came into view. That power was short-lived. He could keep his head up, he could move his feet, but his trainers were carrying him at this point. Holding their man up, they moved as one towards the finish line. The tape had already been broken. Frederick Laws had finished the race and was looking rested, like he'd barely run the full race. Hicks, on the other hand, was nearly dead and suffering from the effects of his medicine. They held him up as he crossed. As the dust settled, the officials approached Frederick Laws. Whispers burst through the stadium as rumours circulated about the nature of his win. It turned out that they had received several reports from spectators who had seen him get out of a car. He came clean, claiming it was just a practical joke. He had never intended to defraud anyone of the medal. With this news, Thomas Hicks was awarded first place, dosed with strychnine and brandy, carried across the finish line by his team. This was the real winner. As the last of the runners made their way into the stadium, the sun was getting lower. Most of the runners were still struggling, almost unable to continue. Several were near death. They were at the end of their ordeal.